I'm Anna. My husband Max and I moved to a small village 2 years ago. We were both feeling tired of the busy city life, and we decided it was time for a big change. Our dream was to live closer to nature, to breathe fresh air, and enjoy the calm and beauty of the outdoors. So, we packed our things and moved to a village surrounded by lush green forests, a sparkling river, and wide open fields. The air here is so fresh, and the peaceful atmosphere makes us feel so happy and content. We knew this place would be the perfect environment to raise a family, so we started planning for the future, hoping to have children soon. We both felt that this was the best place for them to grow up, safe, calm, and full of natural beauty. It just felt right. Not long after we moved, we met our neighbors. They were an older couple who lived just a few houses down the road. Their names were Mr. and Mrs. Grayson. They didn't have children, and they were always so polite when we saw them. They were the kind of neighbors who would wave hello and check in on us to make sure we were settling in okay. At first, I thought everything about them was perfectly normal. But soon, I started to notice something a little strange. Mr. Grayson seemed to have a habit of leaving his house at the same time every evening. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he just went for walks or had somewhere he needed to be. However, what caught my attention was the fact that he always came back after dark. And not only that, I would sometimes see him working in his garden even when it was late, long after most of the other neighbors had gone inside for the night. It seemed a little odd, but I brushed it off. After all, everyone has their own way of living, and maybe Mr. Grayson just had different routines. I didn't want to jump to conclusions or make assumptions about him. But the more I noticed, the more I started to wonder, why did he spend so much time outside at night? Why was he always by himself? Was he okay? For a while, I didn't think much about it. I was still busy adjusting to life in the village, getting to know other neighbors and planning our future. But the little things about Mr. Grayson kept popping into my mind. And deep down, I started to wonder if there was more to this story. As time went by, things started to feel a little off. One day, I was at home with Max, just going about our usual routine, preparing dinner, enjoying the quiet, and chatting about our day. But that evening, something strange happened. We noticed that Mr. Grayson hadn't been around for a while. At first, we thought maybe he was just on one of his long walks or out running errands. But the days passed, and still, we didn't see him working in his garden or even walking down the road like he usually did. It was a little unsettling. The village is small, so when someone is missing for more than a few days, you start to wonder what's going on. Max and I hadn't heard any news from the other neighbors either. Everyone was just going about their business like normal, but it felt strange to have Mr. Grayson gone without any explanation. I started asking around a bit. I went to see Mrs. Grayson to check if everything was okay. When I knocked on their door, she answered, but she didn't seem very happy to see me. Her face was pale, and her eyes looked tired, like she hadn't been sleeping well. She told me that her husband had gone on a business trip and would be back in a few days. I didn't think much of it at the time. After all, people go on trips all the time. But as the days stretched into a week, and then 2 weeks, I began to feel more uneasy. Mrs. Grayson was still alone, and I noticed she didn't seem to be acting like herself. She was more quiet, more distant. I had a feeling that something wasn't quite right. I wondered if Mr. Grayson was really on a business trip, or if there was something else going on. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after Mr. Grayson had disappeared, Max and I were out for a walk when we saw something that made our hearts skip a beat. We were walking near the edge of the village when we spotted Mrs. Grayson sitting on a bench, talking to a man. At first, we didn't recognize him, but as we got closer, I saw that it was Mr. Grayson. He was back, but he didn't look like the man I had known. His clothes were different, and his face was tense, almost like he didn't want anyone to see him. Max and I exchanged a quick look. I wasn't sure what was going on, but my instincts told me something was wrong. We kept walking, trying not to make it obvious that we had seen him. Mrs. Grayson stood up and waved at us, smiling as if everything was perfectly fine. But I could see a flicker of worry in her eyes. I had a feeling she was hiding something, and it made my stomach twist with unease. That evening, I decided to talk to Max about what we had seen. I told him I had a bad feeling about Mr. Grayson's return, especially since he looked so different. Max agreed that it was strange, but he thought maybe we were overthinking it. However, deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. So, I decided to go visit Mrs. Grayson again. This time, I was more determined to find out what had really happened. When I knocked on their door, Mrs. Grayson answered, but this time, her expression was different. She didn't seem as cheerful. I could tell she was nervous. I asked her if everything was okay with Mr. Grayson, and she hesitated before telling me that he had been gone for a while and had just come back unexpectedly. She didn't give me any more details, and I didn't want to push her too hard, but I knew that something wasn't right. I left their house with more questions than answers. The next few days felt like a strange dream. Mrs. Grayson's behavior became more secretive, and I noticed that she was acting a little nervous whenever I bumped into her. She would quickly change the subject if I asked about her husband, and sometimes she wouldn't even answer the door when I knocked. It made me even more suspicious. Max noticed it too, but he still thought I was imagining things. He said that people sometimes act strange after a big event, and that I should just give them some space. But something wasn't sitting right with me. I kept replaying the scene from our walk when I saw Mr. Grayson on that bench. It didn't make sense. Why had he returned looking so different? And why was he being so secretive? I couldn't help but wonder if he was hiding something. One afternoon, while Max was at work, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I walked to the Graysons' house, hoping that Mrs. Grayson might finally open up to me. When she answered, her eyes widened in surprise, and she quickly looked over her shoulder before inviting me inside. Her house felt emptier than usual, as though it hadn't been lived in for a while. As we sat down in her living room, I decided to ask her directly, "Mrs. Grayson, what happened to your husband? Why did he disappear? And why has he changed so much?" For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she sighed deeply and lowered her head. "Anna, I didn't want to tell anyone, but I think you deserve to know the truth. Max deserves to know, too." She paused, gathering her thoughts before speaking again. "Mr. Grayson, he didn't leave because he wanted to. He was forced to go away. It's complicated, and I didn't want anyone to know, but he was involved in something dangerous, something I couldn't protect him from." My heart raced. Dangerous? What could that mean? "What do you mean? Was he in trouble?" Mrs. Grayson nodded slowly, her eyes full of sorrow. "Yes. He got mixed up with the wrong people, and he had to leave to keep me and everyone else safe. He's been gone for longer than he told anyone, and now he's trying to fix things. But it's not that easy. The people he was involved with, they don't just let go. After hearing Mrs. Grayson's words, I felt a mix of shock and confusion. I had never imagined something like this could be going on behind closed doors. The truth was much darker than I had expected. My mind raced, and I began to question everything I had seen and heard over the past weeks. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, feeling a little hurt. Why keep it a secret? Mrs. Grayson's face looked tired, like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. I didn't want anyone to worry. I thought I could handle it myself. But now I see I was wrong. I should have told someone, especially Max. He's too close to everything. I could tell that Mrs. Grayson was struggling, but I didn't know how to help. She was right about one thing, though. Max did need to know the truth, but I didn't want to put him in a dangerous situation. I had to think carefully about what to do next. Should I tell him everything I had learned? Would it put him in harm's way? That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was swirling with questions, doubts, and fears. Max was such a kind person, and I didn't want him to be hurt because of something that had nothing to do with him. But at the same time, he had a right to know what was happening. How could I keep a secret like this from him? I decided that I needed to talk to Max, to make him understand the seriousness of the situation. But how could I do that without causing more problems? It was the hardest decision I'd ever had to make. The next day, I waited until Max came home from work. I could feel the tension in my chest as I tried to gather the strength to talk to him. I had to tell him what I had learned about Lisa and her behavior, but I didn't know how he would react. Would he believe me? Would he be angry? When Max walked in, I tried to act normal, but I couldn't keep my thoughts to myself. I took a deep breath and said, "Max, we need to talk." Max looked at me, concerned. "What's wrong, Anna? You seem upset." "I am upset," I said, my voice trembling. "It's about Lisa. I think she's been acting inappropriately around you, and I don't like it. I know you've been helping her, but she's been doing things that don't seem like normal neighborly behavior. She's been looking at you in a way that makes me uncomfortable." Max looked surprised, and for a moment, he didn't know what to say. "Anna, I don't understand. She's just a friend, a neighbor. I've been helping her because John is away a lot. I know you've been helping her, Max, but it's not just about helping. It's the way she acts when you're around. The way she looks at you, the way she smiles at you. It's more than just friendly. It feels like she's trying to get closer to you in a way that isn't right." Max's face softened, and he took my hand. "I didn't realize you felt this way. I promise. I've only been helping her out. But I understand why you're worried. I'll be more careful and not spend so much time over there." I could tell that Max was trying to reassure me, but I still didn't feel completely at ease. "I just need you to promise me that you'll be more aware of how she's acting, and that you'll never put yourself in a position where things could get complicated." Max nodded. "I promise, Anna. You're the most important person in my life. I'll do whatever it takes to make you feel safe and loved." Hearing those words helped calm my nerves, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Lisa's behavior had crossed a line, and I knew I couldn't let it slide. I had to keep an eye on her, but more importantly, I had to make sure Max and I stayed strong. After our talk, things between Max and me started to feel more settled. He made a real effort to be more mindful of how much time he spent with Lisa. He was kind and caring as always, but now he was also more aware of my feelings. I appreciated that, and it made me feel better knowing that he was taking my concerns seriously. Over the next few days, I noticed something amazing. Lisa started acting differently. She didn't come over as often, and when she did, it was always in a more neutral way. No more lingering glances, no more strange smiles. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I felt more at peace, but I couldn't forget everything that had happened. It had shaken me up more than I wanted to admit. I started to trust Max more again, knowing that he was trying to make things right. It felt like things were returning to normal, and I started to feel like we could move forward without the shadow of doubt hanging over us. For the first time in weeks, I could finally breathe without feeling that constant worry. But I knew that the real test would come when John, Lisa's husband, came back. I felt like everything would truly be better when he was home. I hoped that once he returned, Lisa would stop trying to get so close to Max. It was hard to fully relax until I knew John was back, because it seemed like his presence would finally stop Lisa's advances. When John finally returned home, I was relieved. I could see how happy Lisa was to see him, and it felt like everything was going back to the way it was before. Lisa stopped asking for Max's help as much, and she seemed to focus more on her own life with John. Max and I went back to doing the things we loved, working in the garden, taking walks, and spending time together, just the two of us. For the first time in a long while, everything felt right again. As time went on, I realized that I needed to let go of the fear and doubt I had been holding on to. It wasn't healthy for me, and it wasn't healthy for Max either. I didn't want to keep looking over my shoulder, always worried about Lisa or anyone else trying to come between us. Max had proven to me that he loved me and was committed to our relationship. One evening, while we were sitting outside together, I felt a deep sense of peace. Max and I were watching the sunset, just enjoying the quiet of the moment. I thought about everything that had happened with Lisa, but instead of feeling angry or scared, I felt grateful for the strength Max and I had shown as a couple. We had worked through something difficult, and we had come out stronger because of it. I realized that in order to truly move forward, I had to trust Max completely. He had been honest with me, and I knew that he would never hurt me. Holding on to old fears and doubts was only going to hold me back from experiencing the happiness that we both deserved. With this new understanding, I turned to Max and said, "I'm sorry if I ever doubted you. I know I can trust you." He smiled and took my hand, looking into my eyes. "I love you, Anna. I would never do anything to hurt you." In that moment, I knew that we had come full circle. We had been through a rough patch, but we had learned so much from it. Our relationship was stronger than ever, and I knew that nothing could shake us apart now. After everything that had happened with Lisa, Max and I started to look forward to the future with a clearer and stronger bond. Life in the village was peaceful once again, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life we were building together. We spent more time working on our garden, going on walks, and having long talks about the kind of future we wanted to create. We started talking more seriously about having children. We had always dreamed of starting a family, and the thought of raising kids in such a beautiful, peaceful place made me feel even more excited. We wanted our children to grow up in the same environment we had, surrounded by nature, fresh air, and the simple joys of life. Max and I discussed what kind of parents we wanted to be. We agreed that we wanted to be loving, patient, and supportive, guiding our children with care and giving them the space to grow into their own people. I couldn't wait to share our life with them, to teach them about the beauty of nature, the importance of family, and the value of kindness. We also talked about the future of our home. There were so many plans we wanted to make for the house and the land around it. We dreamed of adding a little garden for the kids to play in, planting more trees, and even building a treehouse. We wanted our home to be a place full of love, laughter, and warmth, a safe haven where our children would feel secure and happy. As we looked ahead, I felt more hopeful than ever. The past had taught me valuable lessons, and now I was ready to embrace the future with Max. Together, we could face anything that came our way, and I knew that with trust, love, and communication, we would continue to grow stronger as a couple and as a family. Looking back, I realize how much I've learned from everything that happened with Lisa. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I felt uncertain, but I'm grateful for the lessons it taught me. Trust and communication really are the most important parts of a relationship. If Max and I had stayed quiet about our feelings, things could have gotten worse. But because we talked openly, we were able to get through it together. Max proved to me that he was trustworthy, and I learned to trust him more. It's easy to let doubts take over, especially when you see something that makes you feel uncomfortable. But I've learned that talking things through is the best way to solve problems. Max and I were stronger after it all, and our love became deeper because of it. The whole situation with Lisa also reminded me that sometimes people will try to come into your life and cause problems. But as long as you stay true to yourself and the people you love, you can face anything. I am so thankful for Max, for the life we have built, and for the trust and love that we share. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Now, with Lisa and John gone, life in the village is peaceful again. It's just Max, me, and the future we're building together. We have so many dreams to chase, and I know that whatever comes our way, we'll handle it together, side by side. Like and subscribe for more stories.